Here's a fun fact for U.S. taxpayers. The cost of the war in Afghanistan is averaging about $4 million per hour. This according to a new report by the National Priorities Project. Analysts point to higher price tags on war expenditures for the rising costs. But these latest figures are also in stark contrast to the fact that the U.S. presence in the country has dropped to 10,000 troops, down from 23,000 in 2007. As the Pentagon has begun drawing down the war. RT correspondent Manuel Rapolo has the story.
The U.S. troop presence in Afghanistan may be drawing down, but the cost of the war doesn't seem to match that reality. Just take a look at some of these numbers. It's estimated that since the start of the war in 2001, over $700 billion have been allocated for fighting in Afghanistan, fluctuating year by year given the fact that the U.S. was also waging a separate war in Iraq. Now, despite the fact that the U.S. has pulled all but 10,000 troops from the country, there's still $35 billion allocated toward the Afghan war for the current fiscal year 2015. Now, keep in mind that in 2001, the initial budget for the war was only $20 billion. These are figures that we've learned from a recent report by the National Priorities Project, a nonprofit group that watches federal budgets. So, what does it all mean? Well, to put it into context, it means that the current rate of spending is about $4 million per hour. We did the math. The reason for such a high price tag is the ballooning cost of pretty much everything to do with war, including weapons, vehicles, and manpower. Consider that back in 2009, the New York Times reported that, quote, even if fewer troops are sent or their mission is modified, the rough formula used by the White House of about $1 million per soldier per year appears almost constant. And that was back in 2009. And as hefty as $700 billion might sound, the report by the NPP also highlights that there are plenty of hidden costs that aren't even considered, such as non-war spending like foreign aid, medical costs for soldiers and veterans, and also the future interest payments on the national debt derived from war spending. Now, it can't go without mention that U.S. funds in Afghanistan often seem to vanish into a black hole due to a lack of accountability. Since 2005, there have been at least 115 enlisted U.S. service members convicted on theft, bribery, and contract rigging charges. One former U.S. Army specialist said in a 2014 interview that, quote, troops were selling the U.S. military's fuel to Afghan locals on the side and pocketing the proceeds. Of course, at the end of the day, the still skyrocketing costs of the ongoing military operations in Afghanistan are dwarfed by the cost of tens of thousands of American and Afghan lives lost in the country over the last 14 years. Manuel Rapalo, RT Studios, Washington.